Good morning. I started this yesterday and forgot to turn the camera on. It's always something. um, this is a little bit about the difference between watercolor, transparent watercolor, gouache, Gouache, and acrylic, i.e. a warning against some very nice inexpensive gouache paints that if you look at the small letters, it says acrylic gouache paints. Those should be considered to be an acrylic. I think they're just a matte acrylic and act a little bit differently, more like a gouache, but they're not, and that has something to do with our palettes and our brushes. So that's what I want to very quickly go over. Okay, this is a watercolor palette you've seen a lot. This is a watercolor palette you've seen a lot. Is my palette dirty? No, it's just charged up and ready to go. It's not wet. Nothing's wet here. What is nice about watercolor is that you can leave your palette, and if you have mixed up something, it's dry, see? You can put water in it as if it were a pan watercolor and use it directly. It's going to be lighter because you're putting water in it, but it's still there. You've got something. Okay. Same with all of these. Generally, when I sit down to do something, I'll take a brush and drip water on each one that I'm going to use and let it sit for a minute. And I mentioned this before, I'll mention it again. The day that you put these out is not the best time to use them. You let them dry overnight so that they stick up here. And then the next day they're going to start falling off of here as you use them. So push them back there and get them stuck on. And then you're really good to go. And look at this. You can just go. Okay, there's a little bit. That was running around loose the other day. So here I'm letting pigment up here run down into the water, and I'm going to stick the rest of this loose pigment up here to get stuck on, pretty much the same way we do ceramics. Let's put two wet surfaces together and stick them together, and when they're dry, should be good. Put a little bit of slip in there. Okay, this is slip. Okay, so here's this, good to go from dry. And another thing about nice watercolors, when it's dry and you don't put like straight pigment on your paper, but you actually put your watercolor on, you can go over what you already have and it won't pick up and mix. Even with a lot of water. Oops, knocked that one loose. Okay, so it's a lot of water. And also, I've mentioned it before, but I might as well mention it now. In prepping your watercolors for use, you put as much pigment as you can down into this bit here. And then you can use a wet brush to pick up what you want. And that's just something you learn by doing, how much water you're going to need in your brush when you go in for pigment. Okay. You can also, this is dry here. We've got a wash there. Okay, now that was wet paint, so I picked it up. You can also write over a wash. You can put another wash. That spreads. The two won't mix together. They will layer. So these are nice little watercolors here. These are Artist Loft watercolors that come in tubes. I like them very much. Okay, so that's watercolor, and you can let it dry and come back to it. You don't have to clean your palette every time. And here's my own palette, and as I said, when I'm getting ready to sit down and do work, I'll put some water up here and after it soaks a little, I haven't really let this soak, but you let it run down into the well, and again you get that at pretty much of an intensity, and then when you use it, you're using a wet brush that you dip into there, and you just learn how much water you're going to need in here to make this color come out at the different intensity. Oh, it looks like I knocked something sideways. Palette, I guess. Okay. This brush has a little bit of a loose spot in it somewhere. I think it might be right there. I'm going to have to glue it. So that's that. If you have a color that you mixed and you're still working on your painting, but you need to let it dry and go back, there's your color that you mixed. If you've got cats around, you might find hair in it from time to time. Okay, now, likewise, gouache is a watercolor. It's an opaque watercolor, which means it's not transparent. Yet, you can allow to dry in a palette. Not necessarily these, but this sort of a palette. Okay, I'll be back there in a second. So you can squeeze the tubes out. These are some that's being reconstituted, and they've just been in there. One of them is this nice earth color. Again, we just throw some water in there to wet it up. Do you see it kind of? Yeah. Drinking up the water down in there. Now, you shouldn't use your gouache like this, but you can, right? It is a water-based. There we go. And you need to mix it more, and you don't want to use your sable watercolor brushes in this because it is literally more earthy. It's much more grainy, and it's rough on your brushes. So I have different brushes for watercolor, for different brushes for ink, different brushes for gouache, different brushes for acrylic, different brushes for oil. I don't use the same ones. All right, let's just try this out. But you see here, I'm getting this to come up. So the real gouache paints like this that you can put in a little travel palette, people find very useful because you can make them opaque and transparent, but you can use a lot less water with them. Look at that, okay? It's opaque. You can mix water with it and make it into a wash also. So a lot of people like this for little sketches on location. They use it as both as a watercolor and transparent watercolor. It's not fully transparent, but it'll do. But it has the advantage of you can use it, to get things painted quickly, and it dries quickly, and you can paint over some of your initial work because it's opaque. I'm afraid this might have been off camera the entire time. Okay. Anyway, so that is gouache here, and you see, and this is transparent watercolor. It's dry. This is dry. And this is gouache. You see how it's much duller. Earthy. Okay. So that's that. Now we get into this other category of these really nice, inexpensive gouache paints that I got. They come in tubes. I was so excited about them. And I was using them in mixed media for the journaling by fives, and using them on stencils and washing them off right away, but not really immediately, because gouache is a tempera, and you can make it wet and wash it off of things. So I worked with this inexpensive gouache here, and then I sat down to wet it up after a long time. Now there's something. Oh, that's just what's in my brush coming out. Gouache. This is not gouache. This is acrylic. And I am so glad that I didn't use any of my nice brushes that I use for gouache with this. I just used, well, I don't know what all I used. I didn't let it dry in them. I didn't let it dry on my stencils, which is fine with tempera and with a real actual water-based gouache. But this is not a water-based paint. And it's acrylic, and I'm going to have to scrape it out. It's in one of my nice palettes. I think maybe this too, here. All of this, I'm just going to have to scrape it out somehow. So, beware of acrylic gouache. I think it's a little acrylic paint that's meant to be used on small things like this, and it looks pretty good, and you can do this with it. But for heaven's sake, wash your brushes immediately. You know, like, not just rinse them, but take them out and take them into the bathroom and wash them with your brush soap or tiny bit of nice shampoo. Okay, not too much shampoo though. You don't want to take the oil out of your brush, and you don't want to be putting conditioner in them either. Just wash it nicely. There is such thing as a brush cleaner, which I use on acrylic, for acrylic cleaning them up when I'm done with them. All right, so I think that's everything I wanted to say, but you know, this is important. That's I don't know if it's Artist Loft, but it's similar. But read the fine print. I thought I had. I read it carefully, but there were part of the label said right on it, acrylic gouache, which is not an, it's an acrylic. It's a matte acrylic, so be careful. I avoid acrylic paints. I like to have just my natural colors. Okay, that's pretty. And this is a rough sketch of a great sunset that I'm going to work back into. Very rough, but I just wanted to give a quick demo of, look at what the thing is, this is a photo I took of one. Look at what the thing is, get the colors down fast, get away from it. Come back later.